What's up guys, my name's Killian and this is my face. I want to talk to you about the 7 things that changed, like in terms of mindset for me, that changed my performance quite a lot. Obviously mindset is a trickier one to cover than my previous 2 videos about hotkeys and settings, as well as like game mechanics, because it requires a lot more sort of, shall we say, pro knowledge, which I'm not a pro, by the way. I've never claimed to be. I'm still relatively a noob. So the thing is though, I guess that I feel like I'm well positioned in that regard because I've just gone through it. To tell you these changes, I'm not telling you these are the best mindsets to have. I'm simply telling you that from not having them to starting having them is what I noticed is the biggest difference to like my wins and stuff like that, and just generally having a good time and feeling like I really know the game. So let's get cracking, right? So I suppose the first thing I want to start with is the idea of planning my base. It's a difficult thing to do when you first start out because it's quite... You don't really know exactly what it's going to look like. You're just doing your best. You're doing what you can. But when you're actually playing, you do want to think about where you're going to place things. So, for example, the front of your base, let's say the enemy is down here, right, by the sacred site. If you know the enemy is going to be coming from this way, you ideally don't want to be putting farms over here because that's going to make it easy for your enemy to harass your workers. So what you'd rather do is you'd rather put them out back like this. Now this map actually isn't great because there isn't much room, but what I would, I suppose, do in this scenario is something more like that, especially if I'm playing English, right? Because you want them to be around your farm. So you want to think, you don't do this at the very beginning of the game, of course, but in your mind, you're thinking like this is where it's going to go. You can even bring it up and like have a look, like that's going to fit there, that's going to fit there, etc. On the front line is going to where you're going to want your production buildings, right? Why are you going to want your production buildings here? Well, because that's where you're going to be sending your troops towards your opponent. You want there to be the shortest travel distance, and also they're the buildings that are the least sensitive to getting whacked a little bit. You can have your houses over here as well if you want. And if you're going second town center, you want to be thinking about that at the beginning. Like, where am I going to put my town center here? Like, for me, if this was a game, that looks pretty good. Why does it look pretty good? Because that defends the farms as well as defending the gold. So again, ship map to demonstrate that on. My apologies, I should have probably thought of that. But it's very much like something you want to think about instead of just throwing down like a house here. I used to do this a lot at the beginning. I throw down a house here, and then later I'd realize it blocks like one of my one of my farm placements. So that will just come with time. If you're too new to really know what's supposed to go where, don't worry about it, do your thing. But just, you do want to eventually move towards that kind of mapping out where things are going to go. That's number 1. Okay, so the next thing, number 2, is you want to kind of think about your research. At the beginning, maybe you don't really know what they do, so you just research whatever, but you do want to think about the priority order of your research. So for example, with English, which is the civ I have the most experience in at this time, I know that wood is going to be primarily very, very important because they build so many farms that cost wood, they build longbows that cost wood, so really that's going to be important. So the first upgrade I'm going to go for when I hit feudal is going to be double broadaxe. You got to think about it because you don't have, I mean, right now I'm playing, on a custom, max resources, but in an actual game, when you reach feudal, you barely have any gold and stuff, so you can't research everything. So if you research something that you're not actually going to be using yet, you're not going to be getting maximum efficiency out of, it's gonna hurt you. It makes a difference, trust me. I know because I've been doing it. So as soon as I learned that double broadaxe first every time, I've started finding that I just have way more wood and my games just go more smoother, right? So it's just something to think about there. The other thing, just in terms of research, you want to think about generally with the blacksmith is you want to think about which the upgrades and stuff you want to go. Generally speaking, it's always really this one. Why? Because you're most likely going to be getting shot by loads of archers or diving town center, whatever, So that's the one you want. Of course, if you're playing English and you've got a shitload of longbows and your opponent doesn't have archers or whatever, then you can go for this one first, Steeled Arrow. It just makes sense, right? Think about what you got, what your opponent has got, and actively make the choice of which one to go for. But when in doubt, the arrow defense is a good one. Okay, so number 3, speaking of watching pros and learning off of them and stuff, one of the things I've picked up on is stone and what it means, and it does make a difference to understanding your opponent. When you're new and stuff, you don't know the civs, you really don't know what stuff means. People always say make sure you're scouting and you always know what your opponent is doing. That's absolutely true, but you know, if you're new, you don't know. You don't know what it means. You know, you see a couple buildings, you don't know all the build orders, you don't know all the civs. But one thing I can tell you, which is really easy to learn, is if you see your opponent on stone, you know they're going for second town center. No one's going for, that's at least as far as I'm aware, correct me if I'm wrong, but no one's going stone so that they can like upgrade their tower in feudal. You know, it's just not what they do. And maybe they'll do that as well, but the reason they put their early game workers, which is huge by the way, you only have a few workers at the beginning of the game, so if they're not collecting wood or food or gold, you're at a disadvantage, right? Because it's basically like they're not having those workers. So when they put them on stone, they're making the active choice, sacrifice some power now in order to build a second town center, because town center costs, in case you haven't worked it out, costs stone, but like other things don't, right? Look at everything else. They just don't cost stone. Obviously later keeps and stuff will, but I'm talking about feudal, right? So when you're scouting and you spot the stone, know that your opponent is going to try and boom, as they call it in this game. I've recently learned, maybe I should make a video about terminology, because there's so much terminology that maybe people within the scene think is normal. It's not normal, guys. Like when you come into it and you hear words like molding and all this stuff, you're like, what? So anyway, perhaps for another video. Yeah, so number 4 is related. What I wanted to say is that if you're going one town center, this is something like at the beginning I used to just go one town center every time just because it's easier to manage. I forget to make workers constantly from one town center, let alone 2, right? So I always used to do 1. And one of the things to bear in mind is if you're going to do that, that's perfectly viable. There are loads of strategies to do that with, but you got to understand that you're playing against the clock. If you don't do, if you're not like doing some serious hurt on them, then you're kind of losing the game, especially because if they've got 2 town centers, they are slowly but surely, or in this case, you know, 3, whatever, which isn't completely unusual, by the way. Some civs do. You are way behind on workers compared to them, and yeah, like they've got swarms of workers running around. You are slowly but surely falling behind on resources, and they are eventually going to crush you. So if you make that choice at the very beginning of the game, which is, by the way, when you make this choice, you don't change your mind partway through, because it's just never going to work. You'll always be behind in that case. If you're thinking, okay, it's 1 TC game, that's all well and good. Make sure you use that time effectively. Make sure you do that early feudal, you know, all in or whatever you're trying to do. So number 5, scouting your opponent, just seeing what's happening, and you're deciding, okay, that's where their gold is, that's where their wood line is. How do I harass this? What do I go for first? This is the thing that's made a bit of a difference to me in terms of winning. Again, just I found this out through the streamers and the pros. I'm pretty sure it's accurate, but if it's not, especially the Japanese and Byzantines, let me know, because I couldn't find as much information about those. But I'm going to put on the screen now the harassment priority order that you want to take against each of these civs. You don't have to memorize it, you can just have it up on your other screen, but I find it makes a big difference. So for example, let's say you're playing English, right? You're charging at your opponent with your longbows, and your opponent is French. You're going to want to go for gold. Why? Because their civ relies so heavily on gold in all their strategies. Some are less black and white, some are a little bit more complex than that, but it's just something you want to keep in mind. Like, if you're just harassing something they don't care as much about, it's going to be less effective. So think about the civ you're playing against in terms of harassment. It's one of the easiest first things you can learn. Yeah, sure, in the future, if you're an advanced player, you're watching this, you're saying, but what about the advanced builders? You know, build orders you should be watching out for this, that, and this, and if they're building 3 of these, it means that. Okay, cool, but we're not going to remember all of that. One of the things we can remember at the beginning is just what to harass in the early game. So just use this list. It's working for me so far. And just bear in mind, of course, like use your brain a little bit. If the thing you're trying to harass is order on the other side of their base and is really well protected, don't just like dive it, and you know, it's a trade-off, right? For example, if you'd rather go for Abbasid stone, but it's like we're in a really safe like place, but their wood line is more readily available, go for the wood line because they care about that as well, right? And you know, even the ones that I haven't written on this list, like it's always going to hurt to harass something, but just sort of bear that in mind. Don't throw yourself into stupid situations. All right, number 6. Perhaps this one should have gone earlier because it's one of the first things I really started to think about, but that's the countering system in this game. if you're super new, I'm just going to put something on the screen. Bear in mind that this isn't comprehensive. It doesn't include all units, but it does give you a good vibe for what to go for. And it really helped me when I had it up on the second screen. I'm talking like when I was really new. This was just the difference between feeling like something was indestructible and feeling like I've really made a breakthrough. So yeah, just bear this countering chart in mind. And that's not really the point I want to make though. Now that you've got that established in your head, I want you to think about what makes the difference here is thinking ahead. So bear with me. Let's say you're playing French and you're going knights. What is your opponent going to do, right? They're going to go spears. So if you already have archers, you know, you want to be playing that 4D chess, right? If you already have archers, you can counter their spears. It's about like thinking, just try and stay one step ahead if you can. That's made a big difference for me, right? Let's say I'm going English and I've got a bunch of longbows out. Well, eventually, my opponent is probably going to go cavalry. It depends on the civ, obviously. My opponent is probably going to go cavalry. So I might as well start backing them with the spears in advance, right? Don't like all in on it, you know, but just start going in that direction. But always, in my opinion, again, this is not pro advice, by the way. This is my advice. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you should always have like 2 in mind. You always want to be doing 2. So you want to be sort of, if they've done this, you're thinking, I'm going to do this with this. I'm going to do this with this. Obviously, you can be more than 2, depending on how chaotic the game is and stuff. Obviously, when you add siege, it changes things up. But just sort of bear that in mind. That's made a big difference for me. Just kind of trying to think that one step ahead, right? So I've got a ton of, let's say I've got a ton of tanky man-at-arms. They're probably going to go crossbows, right? So if I go loads of archers to back my man-at-arms to be able to hit the crossbows, you know what I mean? It's like just trying to stay ahead of them, and it's a really fun part of the game. I love that part of the game. It's like, yeah, it really engages the brain. Number 7, and my final tip. It's not particularly spectacular, but it's a word on build orders. Everyone says the very first thing you say when you say I'm new to the game, people go, build orders, you need to go to build orders. I don't actually agree with this advice if you're brand new to the game. If you're brand new to the game, just have some fun, do whatever you want. But if you're actively thinking, oh man, like I feel lost, I don't really know what to do, it's not a bad idea to have a build order up on the side of the screen, even if you stop using it. Like I found that I would use it for the first 4 or 5 minutes, then things would get a bit mad, and I'd kind of stop following it, and I'd just sort of enjoy myself and learn like that. And then the next time I used it, I'd follow it for about 6 minutes, and then I'd follow it for about 7 minutes, and so on and so forth, you know? So I actually still don't really play with build orders so strictly, but especially when you're trying a new civ, you got to start somewhere, right? You want to know where to begin. So that's just my advice, is that if you're like me and you're not really a fan of build orders when you're just trying to enjoy the game, at least have it up, because it can kind of give you, it's nice to have something to fall back on and refer to, and it sort of gives you a vibe of generally what to go for, even if you don't follow it super precisely. Like these build orders say, take 1 worker off sheep at this many seconds. You don't have to follow it that precisely. Obviously, if you do, there's going to be, you're going to get like an advantage there. But what I mean is, like, you don't have to follow them to the T in order to get an advantage, like in order for it to make a difference. Even if you're following them 50%, that's more of a bonus than you were before you were following them, if that makes any sense. But that's what's made a difference to me. Now and again, if I want to try something new, like the first time I started doing like 2TC and stuff, I would bring up a build order. I'd start following the build order. Now I kind of just know it in my head, so I sort of loosely follow it. And then I sort of adapt on the fly. Again, maybe I'm too newbie to learn how to adapt on the fly. Maybe I should just follow them really strictly. And if you want to do that, you do that. For me, that's a bit dull. So I do like that, being able to flex. And anyway, that's number 7, and that is the last one. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it was a bit more abstract than the previous 2 I've done, but I plan to continue making content. I'm going to do casting videos, I do guides and more, and yeah, so I appreciate a like on the video. It really helps. If you want to stick around, I'd love a sub. I have a Discord if you want to jump in. We group up and game together. I'm looking to grow that side of it as well, because I do love getting to know you guys better and stuff. But yeah, that's it from me. Love you guys. Bye-bye.